This is Paul Murray Live.
Hello, mate. Welcome to the Man Cave. We are standing in front of the big screen. We are doing so for the first time as News24 because the News24 Pulse is here. This is our fortnightly poll put together by our mates at YouGov. The headline is not a lot of movement inside this particular poll, but there is a subset of data that I think tells a really big story about Australian politics right now. But the headline that is up right now at News24 is Coalition One Nation face reckoning to defeat Labor. Now, as for the overall primary vote here, you can see all of the different leaders that are in play there. Well, let's have a look at the latest opinion poll. Labor on top at 28%. One Nation at 24%, the Coalition at 22%. Essentially, three relatively bunched together, but of course, Labor together with the Greens and this growing group. This is going to be a story throughout the whole poll of others and independents. Yes, there are certain splits inside this which are particularly that new sort of community independent party, the Teal Party, that in a national poll they are now at the same level as the National Party, which is 2% across the country. But as you can see here, the primary vote, it is as it seems. Now, as always, I like to break this down by the generation groups. We go, of course, to Gen Z, the youngest of the voters. Labor and the Greens together means this category well and truly is floating to the left. Once you throw in the independent voters as well, again, the Conservative bloc here, well, again, it doesn't even get to a quarter of the vote. Millennials, slightly further up. These are people into their 30s, maybe just touching 40. This is where One Nation starts to show its first signs of strength. In fact, with millennials outpolling the Greens, Labor, however, once again, you put it together with Labor, Greens and other, that's again a category that is leaning slightly to the centre-left, but One Nation there at 21%. What about Generation X? This has been the biggest mover all year when it comes to One Nation. It continues to be the leading party with people who are in, let's say, their mid-40s up to the mid-50s, maybe late 50s as well. One Nation at 31%, Labor at 29%, the Coalition, others and Greens. Not a lot of love for Gen Xers when it comes to the Greens right now. As for boomers, again, people that may well have recently retired, on top here, 61% are sitting to the centre-right of Australian politics, with One Nation edging out the Coalition. To the oldest demographic that we poll, this is the greatest generation because, of course, their connection to World War II. Again, a mega finding here that to, again, the centre-right, big numbers here at 53 and 22. Obviously, 75% of the poll sits where it currently does. So, before I move on to the satisfaction ratings for the Prime Minister, remember when it comes to Australia, there is a straight line, under 50 voters, over 50 voters. Now, obviously, people over the age of 50, the numbers get a lot stronger for the Coalition and a lot stronger for One Nation. However, of course, the very youngest cohort of voters, they, of course, swing towards the left, but importantly, it is not a giant break of everyone under 50 is running to the left, everyone over 50 is running to the right. That number with millennials is really important to notice in all of this. As for the Prime Minister and his personal satisfaction levels, well, Australians remain as frustrated as ever with the Prime Minister, where the dissatisfied number is up yet again. Now, this is, of course, a poll that was done over the past 2 weeks, one of which he was on holidays. So even on holidays, the Prime Minister, who desperately needed a holiday because he hadn't had a day off all year, apart from all the footy games he's been going to, but whatever. The dissatisfaction level, close to 60% there, 57% up to those satisfied down and those that don't know is down. However, despite the fact that he is grossly dissatisfied by a vast majority of Australians, guess what? He still remains the preferred Prime Minister. Because in the race that is the one most likely here, where, of course, we are talking about the battle between Angus Taylor for the Coalition and the Prime Minister on the behalf of the Labor Party, well, it sits in a scenario where the Prime Minister's personal preferred Prime Minister scenario is that he still remains on top. Now, I also want to break down a whole collection of numbers here for you that are, and again, there we go, the preferred Prime Minister number at 42 for the Prime Minister, 37 for Angus Taylor. Now, the next section of polling, I want to take a little bit of time because, again, while there are demographic differences and there's obviously male, female, age groups and all the rest of it, there are three big pots of voters, and this year has been about major changes when it comes to housing. Major changes, of course, where the budget was, of course, such a massive problem. Well, we're going to have a look now at people who own their own home, who are paying off a mortgage or are paying rent right now. First, on the question of cost of living. How are you going financially? Well, again, let's break this down by those big three. OK, for the people who are owning a property, 58% say that they are comfortable, just 17% say that they are struggling. The group that was against Labor halfway through the last term, but then moved back and actually helped deliver the victory to Labor in 2025 were people who are paying off a mortgage. Those who are paying off a mortgage, well, the numbers a little more even here, but the numbers of those struggling increases. Why? Because, of course, we've had 15 interest rate rises since 2022. 36% of people say they are financially struggling who are currently paying off their house. For those that are renting, now, of course, the dream is that one day all of the change and all of the system would help them be able to get a property, but of course they wouldn't be able to get a property if they can't save even the 5% deposit. And more than half of all people renting in Australia. Now, remember, these are not just first home buyers. These are people who are in family situations. There are plenty of people who may well have had a first property, had to sell it, had to get out of it, and they're back in the rental market. The rental market is the place where most Australians are hurting. Bear that in mind when I tell you about how people are voting. Again, when we break it down by people who own a house, people who are paying off a house, or people who are renting for a property. In terms of interest rates, decision made today, of course, by the Reserve Bank not to move on interest rates. But, again, let's have a look here. In the next 12 months, interest rates will, according to people who've already paid off their home, well, 67% say they are going to rise. For those that are paying off their house, the mortgage holders, they also expect that there is going to be an increase in interest rates. 64% of those people believe there is about to be an increase in interest rates. And for those who are renting, either hoping to get into the property market or because they can't save for that deposit, that's the whole point I keep making about the housing debate. Again, the highest number of all here, or sorry, I should say, the second highest number of all of people who believe that things are going to increase. So, three types of Australians all agree interest rates are going to go up. To varying degrees, they are either in financial stress through to feeling comfortable with their financial arrangements. Now, I want to show you here the primary vote when we break it down by people who are paying off a mortgage or are renting. OK, let's have a look here. All right, for people who own a house, 35% of people would say they want to vote for the coalition. 25% say they want to vote for One Nation. Clearly a majority there. Labor, others Greens. And again, I'm being loose with my numbers here, but that other and independent number is starting to grow. I'll talk about it more when we get into the conversation in a second. All right. For those that are currently, let's change to our next slide here, which is the people that are paying off their house right now. Well, the people paying off a house right now, 32% Labor, 28% for One Nation. Let me check here. With mortgage holders, since the start of this year, that's when we started doing the pulse, the start of this year, Labor's primary is down 4 points. Now, if that was to happen at an election, that is going to be the difference between potentially majority government, the mega majority government and minority government. Not a flip of government, but that's why mortgage rates are an absolute indicator of where mortgage holders are going to go. And mortgage holders, at the end of 2024, they were against the government. Once rates started to fall a couple of times, they moved to the government, and we all know what happened with the overall polls. For those that are renting right now, this is the biggest number to report here. One Nation is at more than a quarter of the vote with people that are renting in Australia. Now, the coalition, way off here at 9%. If you want to look at part of their problems across the country, and yes, it may be overly simplifying to go and find one slice of data, but again, this is a third of the country, less than 10% of people are going to be voting for the coalition. this is where they have to improve their support. Because obviously, yes, a lot of people with One Nation. Labor, of course, they have traditionally led in this group, but are now echoing exactly where One Nation is. So, in terms of the water, it looks relatively still. You start to look underneath, the currents are moving around. There is an increase overall in some of the independent and minor parties to the left. There is significant movement when it comes to people who are renting. There is movement against the government to people who are paying off a mortgage. All of these numbers and a whole lot more are up right now at news24.com.au. So, after spending that time talking about houses, how can I not talk about the big news from today, where the Reserve Bank did nothing?
The Reserve Bank has left interest rates on hold.
It's on hold. It's on hold.
The cash rate will remain on hold.
Rates will stay on hold.
Now, can I just say, when I've been watching so much of the media, obviously my whole career, but certainly today, relief for mortgage. How is it relief? Currently, anyone paying off a house is just being choked by these rates. Oh, but the choke didn't get any tighter. Well, the choke is the tightest it has been in a generation. These are the highest interest rates since post the pandemic. And again, I keep talking about 2024 because that's when the water was really going out against the government. Well, in 2026, it is basically back where it was in those days before the 2025 election. And essentially, these polls are basically where the government was after the disaster that was their budget. Why was there no decision today when it came to the rates?
Today, the board decided to leave the cash rate unchanged at 4.35%. Our forecasts are for inflation to ease through next year and be back around the midpoint of the target range by the end of 2027. The board therefore decided to leave the cash rate target unchanged at this meeting to allow more time to assess whether the economy is evolving as expected. However, the forecasts are uncertain and there are upside risks to inflation. So we will still need to see some further progress before the board can be confident that we are going to get inflation back to target with current monetary policy settings. The board will raise interest rates further if that is what is required to bring inflation down in a timely way. The board will be closely watching for evidence of upside risks to inflation materialising. Now, I understand this is a difficult period for some households. High inflation hurts all Australians, especially the most vulnerable, and that is why bringing inflation down is our priority.
So let me be very clear about the state of play when it comes to politics in Australia. While there are many other issues that often we discuss, there are many other issues that may dominate question time, clearly the single biggest issue in the country is people trying to pay off their home or those that are renting in a home that somebody else is owning. That's no disrespect to those that have already done the hard work to own their own home, but it's the collective concern that people have for the next generation to be able to get in, or the current generation, and yes, the next generation as well, to be able to hold on to the properties that they currently have. The government is being held back by interest rates. The difference between where they are now and where they were in the election last year is interest rates. So for the vast majority of economic people to suggest there is no hope of an interest rate cut this year, and the Reserve Bank saying there is a chance of it going up again, means the political fortunes of the government are unlikely to change until interest rates do. And speaking of in all of this, there is, of course, a lot of BS that this government has said about housing. But as I have travelled the country, obviously I get to talk to a whole bunch of people, and including just before we do our towns, I talk to the audience for a few minutes beforehand, and it doesn't matter where I am, it doesn't matter which city, it doesn't matter what state, the majority of people put their hands up and say that they are willing to change their vote from something that they did last time to something completely different next time if they think it is going to help their kids get into housing. This is why the government thinks that the politics is eventually on their side after the lies became law. Remember, 50 times we're not changing, and then they changed anyway because they believe that the numbers work in their favour, and then if interest rates start to fall. By the time of the next election, bang, they're off to another mega victory. But as you know, all of this has been sold to us in about 100 different ways, but one way is, well, it was always BS, but let's prove it to you. Remember when they said this about why they had to make the lies law at the budget?
We've got to build.
Speed up the housing development.
Deliver housing supports for Australians, build more homes.
An uplift in housing.
We've got to build.
Well, at the same time as the Reserve Bank made no decision when it came to interest rates, they also released a very detailed quarterly statement about the economy. This is how it was written up today by John Rolfe in the Daily Telegraph, also available, of course, Herald Sun, Courier Mail, Adelaide Advertiser, Hobart Mercury. New official forecasts from the Reserve Bank of Australia contain more bad news for the Prime Minister and the Treasurer, revealing that the incentive to build new homes has been weakened by a steeper than expected real estate market downturn since Labor backflipped on its pre-election vows to leave capital gains tax and negative gearing concessions untouched. You just heard them. The sales pitch was build, build, build. Well, guess what? The Reserve Bank, all the boffins, all the machines, all the human AI there, the surprise tax changes, which are expected to improve receipts by more than $40 billion, as in the tax receipts for the government. The whole reason they made the change was because they are running out of money. There is $1 trillion worth of debt, and this will give them an extra $40 billion to play with at an election time. Lower household prices weigh on household consumption by reducing household net wealth and spending related to housing turnover. Pay attention here, because weaker housing prices also reduce the incentive to build new homes. Not me, not the Telegraph. This is the Reserve Bank today. That oddly worded final clause, this is the writing of John Rolfe, however, the oddly worded final clause means that if the housing construction market was not already at full tilt, the impact of higher rates and shock increases to taxes would be more severe. So they said, we're going to change everything because we need to get everyone into houses. The number of people in financial stress who are renting, presumably the people that all of this was for, well, they don't have enough money left over to get the deposit. The people who may well end up getting the 5% deposit, well, there's a nervousness about them even getting into the market right now, because the assumption is that as prices are falling in lots of areas, do they want to get in when the price is here, or hope that it gets to here? Because, of course, the reality with interest rates up here, if they go up any further, because they've only got a 5% deposit, because they've only just got there when it comes to qualifying for the loan, they cannot afford any further increases when it comes to interest rates. The cost of a new build, the ones that you are still able to negatively gear, well, unsurprisingly, the cost of borrowing money keeps... The whole problem is related to interest rates directly linked to inflation. Australia's inflation worse than other parts around the world. And of the 3 interest rate rises this year, 2 of them were before the war in Iran, okay? Now, Prime Minister was asked about this today. I know you've seen it on other programs, but I want to drive the point home. Here was the question he was asked about, the idea about whether it is good or not that people's value of home has gone down since the changes he announced.
Labor's toxic taxes have tanked the housing market. ANZ Bank today reports Sydney house prices could fall by almost 15%, the worst crash in more than 4 decades. Will the Prime Minister finally admit Labor's broken promises on capital gains tax and negative gearing have made millions of Australian homeowners worse off?
This is important, because I'm going to tell you a number in a second that is the proof about how millions of people are really concerned right now. But the Prime Minister, well, here was his response, where he kind of owns it, kind of doesn't own it, because he doesn't know how it's going to poll yet.
We had measures that were aimed at addressing the challenges that are facing young Australians when it comes to owning a house. What we have had is creating a change in the way that the tax system operates in order to give first home buyers a fair crack.
No. You made a decision that made your government $40 billion richer. That's it. Unless they're doing anything to help people get that first home deposit. And I don't mean dropping the threshold to 5%. I mean being able to save any of it. Well, then the conversation is moot. And why did Angus Taylor today talk about millions of people being concerned? Because about 3 million properties have been sold, therefore bought, since 2020. That means there are 3 million people who right now bought when the interest rates were this, the rates are now this. If they lose their job, if they break up, they've got to sell their house, and the house is now worth less. With the stated goal being to make it even cheaper, 3 million people. That is the key number you need to remember. Those are the people who will be fine in 5 years, fine in 10 years, but they are not fine for the next 6 months. They are not fine for the next 2 years, let alone the people who will need to sell their house in order to pay for aged care. You see, if the government turned around and said, well, here's the deal. What we're going to do is, we know you're probably not going to get as much for your house when you sell it, but we're going to make aged care cheaper. So don't worry about it. But no, that didn't happen. It's a $40 billion rake-in for the government so they can turn around and spew it out as a bribe between now and the next election. That's why they made the decision. They make it seem like they're doing something for younger people when they're not actually doing anything for younger people. And for the 3 million people, including young, middle-aged and old, who bought a joint in the past 3 years, well, guess what? You're just the grist for the mill. And again, the hypocrisy at the end of all of this, the Prime Minister made his millions. He will retire on a lifetime pension. He will go to the mansion on the hill. And then he pulled the ladder right up from behind him. One of the many reasons why 6 out of 10 people, according to our opinion poll, dissatisfied with the Prime Minister right now. Census night tonight. Are you excited? Have you done it yet? Have you done it yet? Of course, you've heard all day about the census. Today is the day that you are supposed to do it. Yes, there is a minor technicality where there's a couple of days you still have to get it in, but let's just assume midnight tonight. Before you go to bed tonight, do the census, okay? As of 10 a.m. this morning, more than 5 million households have already filled it out. There are about 15, 17 million households, I think. So about a third of people already did it before this morning. Now, 3 questions, okay? Let's be very clear. Yes, you have to fill it out tonight. There will be a $364 fine per day if you fail to fill it out. Now, technically that kicks in a couple of days' time, but just assume before you go to bed tonight. And I got this wrong a little bit earlier in the week. To that I apologise. But yes, you have to answer all the questions, okay? Answer all the questions. Now, if you have not been able to get the codes and all the other things to be able to do it online, maybe somebody never physically got to you, well, if you're on the east coast of Australia, you have got about 35 minutes to reach out to the Census Help Centre. It closes at 10 p.m, wherever your local time zone is, be it east, middle or west. 1-800-181-227. I'll go again. If you have not got your census paper yet, you're in the East Coast, the telephone number right now, 1-800-181-227, open till 10 p.m. Otherwise, get online, start.census.abs.gov.au, okay? Now, you may well have heard by now that the Strathfield Council is making a very obvious and clever choice here, right? Because the reality is Australia's only ever going to get bigger. Remember, 30 years ago, 18 million people. Today, it is 28 million people. We're on our way towards 40, 50 million people in 30 years from now. And does that mean there's going to be greater cultural diversity? Yeah, absolutely. But should everyone, regardless of whether they were born, they came here, be able to work out what is happening in their local suburb? Yeah, I think so. Which is why in Strathfield a decision has now been made that they are going to make sure that all of the signs are also in English. What a crazy idea. This is something that is coming into effect, and I think it's a clever idea. Of course, for the Sydney Morning Herald, there was an opportunity for outrage, so they went and found a bunch of people to say, is this a problem? No, it's not a problem for us. The whole point is this. There are people who visit places like Strathfield. There are people who visit places where there are more signs in languages that are unfamiliar to the majority of Australians, and guess what? They also have the right to be able to go in and buy stuff. It's good for your business, for 28 million people to be your potential customer, which means who has a problem at all with the idea of more signs in English? Me? Absolutely not. Now, I want to talk about some rain. This is some good weather news here because our mates in regional Victoria, well, they've been beaten about for a long time. The Victorian drought has gone on for a long time, and the good news is the reports today are relatively good rain. Good and healthy rain in the parts that need it. Yep, I know there's still an awful lot that still is swinging around in Melbourne, but still, this is a good thing. Widespread heavy rain has hit just in time for the crop season. Here is the News24 weather explaining exactly what happened today.
Looking at our ocean temperatures as a whole, we have a significant marine heatwave occurring off the Tasman Sea right now and warmer seas in the southern Indian Ocean. Now, they help to bring moisture-laden air across the Australian continent, and this can conflict El Nino and the positive IOD and lead to above average rain.
Good. Hopefully everyone's okay. Give us a report about whether it has got to the right place where you are. You can always send me an email, which is paul@news24.com.au. Quick break, back with more. We'll talk about those signs and whether more signs should be in English. Again, bilingual, fine, fair enough. I want 28 million people to be able to go into that tandoori joint. Or the optometrist. See how it works when you've got it in both rather than just in one? More in a sec. Thank you so much for watching wherever you happen to be. Ross Goodell, well, he's in Canberra right now because he's a senator. It's convenient that he's there, of course, because that was the whole thing he ran for, right? Got elected to as well. None other than, of course,
is he really there? It's just a backdrop.
I know, we just move it around. Yeah, he's just at home. He's got his footy shorts on. Darren Barnett, of course, mother from another brother, or brother from another mother. Gee whiz. So, the News24 Pulse. Again, my quick reading of things, at least in the presentation of things, is the headline, not a lot of movement that's visible above the water, but the currents below are really fascinating, and particularly when you start to break things down, essentially what this year has been about politically, which is housing, where it is the mortgage holders, Labor's vote is down. Why? Interest rates have gone up, right? The rental vote is extraordinary for One Nation right now. And a problem for the coalition is they're standing in some of these areas, but I'll get to that in a second. Anyway, that's me verbling. What did you think of the poll?
Look, One Nation stays strong. They haven't diminished. That's not really surprising. The rental numbers are important. Those numbers, what is it, 27% One Nation, 9% coalition. That's a real concern for the coalition. Labor and One Nation are about the same. What I think is going to be one of the critical things in the next 18 months or whatever it is until an election, where do house prices sit? If they fall just a touch, people might be able to tolerate that. Younger voters might see, and the reasons are a mixture of war, the war in Iran, there's rates. It's not just government policy.
Sure. But inflation was running hot before the war. But anyway, yes.
No, I'm agreeing with you. But the government would claim the win, right? And they would say to younger voters, we're trying to look after your interests. And I still think that voters under 30 are what delivered Albo his massive majority. They don't pay huge attention to news channels and newspapers and other things. But if they see that housing is a little bit more affordable, that will be a real bonus for the government. So I think that housing remains, and obviously it's the flip side of immigration and other areas of public debate, but housing remains probably the critical issue heading to the next election.
Yeah, but again, I'll say this about millennials, right? And again, I know we're slicing and dicing here and there's a lot of numbers being hurled about, but this is the hardcore politics chat, right? The hardcore politics channel, and I know you can keep up here, right? You're right about young voters. youngest of the voters, of course, One Nation, 7%. Millennials, still under 50, it jumps to 21%. The Greens go from 25% with the youngest cohort, that falls to 18. So the idea that, essentially, people having their first or second vote, well, they're always going to go one way. Well, plenty of people that might be having their third or fourth vote, they're starting to edge out as well.
Let Ross have his say, but Labor's vote between those two cohorts is 32 and 29. It's remarkably steady.
Yeah, correct. All right, Ross, lots to dissect here, but everyone can handle it. What do you think of it?
Polling's my bag. I love it. It went and had a good squeeze in it. And the best way I can play it is every dog has fleas in this race. They're looking there. People haven't settled anywhere. Labor, they know what they're getting. They don't necessarily like it. That's why they're low. Us, they know that we've got a team and we can do there. They just don't know how we're going to fix things and we'll get our ideas. That's on us to get there. And One Nation, they like what they say, but they're worried that if they can deliver it, if they've got the team to do it. Every dog, and Greens. Well, Greens are just a bunch of commos running around trying to destroy the joint. So every dog has fleas. Australia deserves better. We all need to do better. And there's opportunity there. You're seeing this move in the low because there's every opportunity cost. I think the really disappointing thing to me is the state of the country at the moment. Well, you've got us and One Nation combined still only, I think, under that poll it was about 46%. Mm-hmm. That's not enough. When you've got to change this country, when you need change to make our lives better, when you need these things, we need to be doing better. I can't believe Labor are hanging on as well as they can in the circumstances. That's on us. We need to do more.
Well, correct, right? And look, a bigger, deeper conversation. No doubt this is going to be part of, the Fight for the Right documentary that Chris Kenny's been able to put a lot of time into, bigger and better brains right across our operation here. But there's a question about the economics, and then for younger voters, there is that question about climate change, right? Now, whether that becomes a ceiling for some and a floor for others, again, whether I like or disagree or all of those things, this is part of the conversation about how high can you go, how low can they fall, and I also think it's really interesting in these numbers, this increase, and I just want to double check it again, this is in 2 weeks, independent and other, okay? And there's lots of things that are in independent and other, but there's a national 2% vote for a party that's got 2 members, and that, of course, is Zali Steggall and Allegra Spender right now, okay? Now, that has been part of the growth that's happened in all of this, so again, wait, watch and see. All right, I know, I get it. So many people complain about polling chat, but how can we not? The windsock is blowing, it is moving, it is the data. We all like sitting there watching election nights as the early returns are coming in. This is the mini ones that come between now and then. All right, gambling laws. Ross, you're a man who never holds back about where you are. You were willing to toss in a job in the shadow ministry. Where are you when it comes to these changes? Because Matt Canavan, your leader, told us last night, no, this is not a done deal. There's a discussion happening as we speak. We understand in joint party room today, some people stood up and said, oh, hang on, before we join everyone jumping over the cliff here with more regulation, where do you sit?
I was one that stood up in the party room and said, before we jump over the cliff here, the answer's simple. If you look at tobacco, illegal tobacco, if you look at vaping, if you look at cigarettes, if you look at under 16 media ban, regulation has fixed nothing, right? We've driven it to other sources. We've just created problems, and all we do is hurt legitimate industries in Australia. We've hurt our distilleries. We've hurt tobacco to illegal crime. And if they can't show me a way that increasing our regulation and changing will actually fix these problems, they're problems we want to fix. I get this. Underage bullying on social media was something we want to fix. But we keep coming up with rubbish solutions to do it. And I do not want to hurt Australian industries, Australian businesses that we can hold accountable, send the money in banking overseas if we don't get the fixes right. I want to protect children, I want to protect problem gamblers, but let's not legislate just to create more problems for going forward.
What are the chances that the Nats go one way and the Libs go another on this one?
Hasn't worked out twice in the past, but we'll see on this one. We'll see how we go. Look, I think there'll be common sense here. I think this is something where there needs to be common sense, and we'll give it.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those things, Darren. Now, look, again, it's a little bit weird, right? When you turn around and you say, I'm a smoker, people know automatically what that means. It's a terrible, stupid thing. You're going to, it's a dumb life choice, right? But also if you turn around and say, I'm a gambler, right? People automatically think, geez, hang on, he's got a problem.
Everyone thinks you're a problem gambler, that's true.
That, of course, is not the majority of people who bet on sport, play the pokies, right? I just like to be as open and honest with people as possible, right? Like, love it, leave it sort of attitude, right? It's that I play the pokies. No problem with that every now and then. So I have a different view about gambling than maybe either the majority, the zeitgeist, or whatever. But it does feel like there is this, this is the thing that we're going to...
It's the latest crusade. It was plain packaging for cigarettes. And you look at one-day cricket. When we were kids, it was the Benson and Hedges Cup. Then it was the VB Cup. But I'm sure it was sponsored by gambling. It's so you follow who's the main sponsor of the one-day cricket, I reckon. But at the moment, there is... Look, the Peter Murphy report did gather significant support from the Parliament and the public. Now, the government is expected to be as close to that as it can. The PM will wind it back because he's got a very strong personal knowledge and relationships with people in the media and how do we fund media, how do we fund sport being on TV, and the gambling lobby, for want of a better term. So I think sensible heads will prevail. And this is actually, and I'm not saying this to be political and difficult, but this is a really good opportunity for the coalition to prove that they are also a party of government.
Yes.
And so by that and the NDIS changes, if the coalition comes to a deal with the government on those two this week, it makes them look more like a party of government, not less.
Yeah, I mean, my point is just about this, and again, maybe it's the completely wrong way to go, right? But still, it feels like so many people, when they are talking about things like gambling, Ross, are the people who don't, right? And this reminds me a little bit of the same logic that was there about greyhound racing in New South Wales, the same logic about greyhound racing in Tasmania. I know we haven't talked about that as much as we should have, right? But I'm completely aware of all of the problems, right? I'm completely aware, and any excesses that we can pull back, sure. If advertising is a way of not normal, fine, right? No problem, right? I've even got an idea that would absolutely destroy the poker machine industry, but I won't announce it on television, right? And it's not mass regulation, right? But it seems to me that, again, some of sort of the fervour in this area is that this is, the great social, above all social ills, this is the one that's got to be dealt with. But the reality is, take your pick, right? 3 million people will run out of food this week. The urgency around that, the question time, the campaign, the Four Corners story, no one's going to be interested in that, even though that's, again, significant issue that must be dealt with great urgency here? Or am I just missing the point and missing the moment, Ross, as so often I am accused of doing?
No, you're getting it exactly right, because this is look how caring and wonderful and violent I can get behind this issue. This is depth, and we can bring out a guy that, had the worst thing in the world done to him by gambling reps. Mate, let's see what that guy did when there wasn't gambling reps around. Let's see all these sorts of things. I'll be honest with you, my parents had two tabs. Mum will be watching. Hi, Mum. They had Tyzel and Singleton tab in the Hunter Valley. And I worked around and I saw these people. They cared about, when you've got businesses that are there, they care about the people with problems. They don't do these things, and we want to put it in the hands of people. It is just something... It's us in Canberra, it's people in this building that think we know better than you how to live your life. It is the way we've got in this such an empty bag of a country. Remember what it was when you're talking about these things and, Booney and Brocky and all these guys back in the day when we're living life to large? Because suddenly people in this building said they know better than you. And this is just another example, and they don't. Let people live their lives, remove some warning signs, and let the idiots sort themselves out.
Well, also, I wish we had as much public conversation about, the consumption of illegal drugs and how that is effectively socially totally normalised, right? As opposed to legal things like gambling, which, again, there's this sort of relentless want to somehow rid ourselves of. And ironically, sort of what used to be the great moral brigade of the churches, 20 years ago, has now become the moral crusade of the wokies, right? And it's still all... It feels at times quite pearl clutchy, and I instinctively, as a Gen Xer, kind of push back at those kind of moments. All right, last one here. Does the Prime Minister have to say sorry to the Prime Minister of Japan, or is this one of those ones that if you know, you know, but if you don't know, you don't care?
He certainly hopes he doesn't. I think they're trying to just bat it away and let other issues take over, and I think that's what will happen. I think as much as will be said publicly, has been said publicly. I think in many ways the surprise was the leak of an official document that the Oz had today. That surprised me. I don't know how that got out there, where the leak came from, but I think look, there's bigger and more important things to talk about. That's what will happen.
I don't disagree. Look, I had plenty to say about the podcast at the time, but look, again, we'll see where it all goes. Ross, thank you very much. I do appreciate it. Darren, thank you to you as well. Again, lots of talk about polls. That's no more of that right now, because after the break, we're going to have a talk to a politician who actually had an inquiry and actually came to the result that is blatantly obvious to us, but is not a fashionable opinion, which is the plan to ruin the earth to save the atmosphere is running roughshod over regional areas. That politician, next. Finally, we have got even more evidence behind what we have known the whole way through, which is that the race towards the renewable transition has, of course, come at the absolute detriment of many regional communities and, of course, many environmental areas. There was a report which has recently been done by the New South Wales Upper House, and it found predictable and avoidable harm has taken place to multiple communities. Why? Because they just roll in, they say this is where it's going to happen, and then just like a razor blade going through, you can see the mountain ridges, or you can see what should have otherwise been the fertile grounds where people are able to harvest their stock. Of course, giant power lines over the top of it and all the rest of it. Mark Banasiak is the member of the New South Wales Parliament. He is with the Shooters, Fishers and Farmers Party. He is the man who was in charge of the committee that found this to be true. Nice to see you, Mark.
Thanks for having me, Paul.
All right, so again, people sit back and they watch shows like this, they vote for parties like yourself, and they just know in their bones that a decision has been made which is bugger it when it comes to all of the inevitable consequences of the rollout, none of which would be acceptable at the local dog park in Sydney, but apparently is all completely okay for people like yourself in Kempsey or you name it, anywhere else around the state and around the country. What did you find?
Well, you hit it on the head when you said that we found that the government has caused predictable and avoidable harm, and this is harm that we predicted back in 2021 when we debated Keen's diabolical bill that started this malarkey for 36 hours straight. We predicted a lot of these things would come to pass, and they have. And obviously, after that legislation passed, I started hearing a lot of anecdotal concerns from landholders and people in the regions, and I said we've got to get this stuff on the record, and so that their voices could be heard. And yeah, it's
because that's a big part of all of this, isn't it? Where it's like, and again, I remember I was talking to a bloke in Armidale a couple of weeks ago, right? You can see that it's like, mate, I am sick of telling people about this, but it feels like no one is believing me that this stuff is happening. And even if they sort of acknowledge that it's happening, they just don't care. And this is why, you know, your report absolutely stood out to me because, again, this is not some sort of, you know, roughshod, crazy thing that gets pushed through by an upper house the government doesn't control. This is multi-parties. This was deep. This was going to the 5 different zones that are being affected in all of this. And it's not just, you know, Bob at the pub telling a story. This is the proven story of regional Australia.
Yeah, absolutely. Over 200 submissions. As you said, we went to every single renewable energy zone, 25 findings, 16 recommendations. It's probably the most comprehensive review of what this government's been doing to regional and rural New South Wales. And it covered everyone, farmers. It was Bob at the pub as well as farmers. It was councils. Yeah, it was everyone. And the message was consistent across all the regions. The government has failed here in the rollout. EnergyCo has failed. Consultation has been a sham. And the communities have just been railroaded, you know, for
so do you think
speed and expediency.
So again, right, for certain people, there's a threshold where I don't want that here for all the different reasons why they don't want that here. I get it. But then there's other people who part of the frustration is that there's no golden bulldozer that's moving through here. It's not like there's a new pool that's turning up in their town. It's not like the library's being paid for. What are some of the things that these companies that are building all of this stuff could do to do their best case to leave the joint better than they find it, even though they're screwing up the joint?
Well, I think, first of all, they've got to be honest with the community. Quite a lot of the developers haven't been honest with the community. Even EnergyCo hasn't been honest. And they're starting the relationship often on a bad foot by actually trespassing on these people's properties. The first time that they're dealing with them is when the landholder finds them wandering through their paddocks. Like, straight away, that sets the relationship, in a negative sense. And it shouldn't just be about throwing money at the community either. That's been the government's answer throughout this whole process, is just to throw more money into the community hush fund. But that's not what the community's asking for. They want to be actually listened to. They want to see actually their feedback and what they're saying in these consultation forums actually go to changing things in these projects, and it's not happening.
Well, and also it again, and you mentioned it there with a couple of companies, but it feels like, again, there's this sort of computer says no kind of attitude that it's like, hey, once we've got the approval and we get that, in Sydney, then bugger it, we're turning up with a piece of paper and it's going to happen anyway, and the law's on their side and all the rest of it, so the bulldozer comes through. But also, how much of it is cultural that the people who are representing this development are not from the community? They're people who are coming up from Sydney. And again, no offence to the people who grow up in one part of Australia versus another part of Australia, but geez, it'd be helpful if the person representing the big company was from the joint that it's changing.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the key things that we found, was that it was just either people from Sydney or even overseas speculators coming in who had no idea, no ties to the area, and quite often would disappear halfway through the process, and then community was left trying to work out who they're going to be dealing with next. There's some projects that have gone through 5, 6, 7 changes in personnel, through the lifetime, and they haven't even got through the approval stage. It's just diabolical. And what we found is that the planning system actually emboldens these people, and actually there's more power to the developers than there is to the community. And when you've got maybe 50 of these projects going through the planning process at once, that's 50 projects that every single landholder in the area has to read EISs for and try and respond to, and try and even just find out what the hell's going on. It's a lot of stress, and it takes away from them actually living their life and providing, producing food and fibre for us.
I was going to say, apart from the day job, which of course is dawn to dusk and a whole lot more worry on top of it. Mark, I just wanted to people to hear about the report, and obviously we'll talk plenty more, and we'll try and follow it down the rabbit holes of government trying not to talk about it, but we'll keep talking about it. Good on you, mate. Appreciate it.
No worries. Thanks, Paul.
All right, quick break. Back with more here on Paul Murray Live. Looking forward to showing you the nonsense of social media, because they're all together at the big fun house. The Canberra fun house. Oh, we're having so much fun representing the people. Ugh. All right, quickly before we go, tomorrow night, of course, our mate Megan Kelly is on the show. You work hard, we all pay too much tax, we pay the politicians who increase that tax, and they pay, or we pay, people to help them make crap social media videos like this one from a cabinet minister.
Unsubscribe. Unsubscribe. Ugh. Don't you just hate it when you're trying to unsubscribe from a service that you no longer need? It's like a bad breakup, right?
That's what they did today. That's what they're doing. I suggest people unsubscribe from following her on social media, but each to their own. Here's the late debate.